Okay, so we are recording. So the reason why I put the quote up there is just because it's just kind of a good uplifting quote. I think it was Gandhi, if I remember correctly. Right, but live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever, right? You should always be learning, always trying to absorb information, right? It's never a bad thing to know more, but also, live today to the fullest. We always hear live today to the fullest, but I like adding the learning aspect into it because it's not like we live today. It's like, hey, let's just have fun and do what we want to do. Like, let's live today with purpose. And my purpose today is to teach photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, it's broken out into two cycles. It's broken out into two halves, right? The light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. I'm going to get my silly analogy out of the way from the start for you to think about it. If you're in my class 4, right, you definitely know this. We have solar power calculators, right? What type of energy do solar power calculators run on? And everyone says solar energy. That's not true. They're just like any other calculator. They run on electricity, right? That's what they run on. Just like battery-operated calculators don't run on chemical energy. They run on electricity. However, what do? They have a little photovoltaic cell that can change, a little solar cell that can change light energy into electrical energy. So they run directly on electrical energy. However, they can convert light energy into usable electrical energy. What type of energy do plants run on?
Chemical energy.
Specifically what?
Photosynthesis. Well,
they run on the same type of energy we run on, glucose. That's what they run on, right? But they have a system to change light energy into that usable chemical energy. So you kind of get the concept there, right? They don't run directly on sunlight. They run on sugars, glucose, just like we do. However, they get a nice little system that can change light energy into usable chemical energy. So our two cycles are the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. Just a quick recap here, and this is really just kind of the test, right? It's a plant, obviously autotroph, heterotroph. Autotroph. Big heterotroph. It's a bullet ant, one of the most powerful stings in the insect world. Very painful. This right here is looking, you can't see them, but they're microscopic bacteria living deep down the ocean thermal vents.
Autotroph.
They're autotrophs, chemoautotrophs, right? It's chemosynthesis, similar to photosynthesis, except the energy is being provided by these inorganic chemicals.
Heterotroph.
Thank you. Who's going to say autotroph?
No.
Many of my students say autotroph. No, heterotroph's correct.
Oh.
But many people say autotroph, right? I put it up there because, hey, they are fungus. They decompose. They are not autotrophs. They are heterotrophs.
And actually, I have a, this will say this offhand, I actually have a field guide to fungi and whatnot.
Oh, really? That's cool. That's cool. Have you identified many of them?
Actually, I have identified a few.
Okay. That's fun. Very cool. When we look at photosynthesis, right, we have to realize it's not just plants. There's algae. There's euglena, single-cell protist, this little euglena right here. There are different types of bacteria that all undergo photosynthesis. So it's not just a plant thing, right? There's a number of different organisms that can undergo photosynthesis. Okay? I am recording. I'm trying to pause a little bit to give a chance to people who are taking notes here. All right. Just looking at photosynthesis and chemosynthesis, again, they're very similar, except here our reactants are carbon dioxide and water, right? Energy is absorbed through light energy, and it's used to produce sugars and oxygen as byproducts. Here, we have carbon dioxide and water. However, we also have these other chemicals known as hydrogen sulfide. The hydrogen sulfide replaces the light energy. Knowing that hydrogen sulfide is not a bad thing to know, but we don't go into detailed chemosynthesis. Just being aware of it is what we need. But simply, that hydrogen sulfide is what provides the energy versus light. But we still produce carbon dioxide, but we also get this nice little sulfuric acid as well. I forget, I don't know where it was, but it was like this deep cave. Everybody remember, what was the Planet Earth? Remember the series on Discovery Channel called Planet Earth? Yeah, they're great. And there's one that's like caves. And one of the caves they go into, literally, the water is acidic. Like it's very, very strong. sulfuric acid because it's a chemosynthetic bacteria living there. So it's basically a big cave of acid. Kind of crazy.
So if you went into that, would it like pierce you?
Yeah, it could. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wait, so like it could burn you?
Oh yeah. Unless you jump in and you melt. But if you go swimming in that water, you're not going to do well. Yeah. All right. This is an important slide. We need to be familiar with leaf anatomy. So if you want, you can kind of sketch one on the side or just kind of circle the key things we need to know. I'm going to focus in a little bit here. And I'm going to talk about a few things. Okay, so when we look at this, we are not looking at the top of a leaf, we're looking at the cross section of a leaf. So we're looking at the thin edge of a leaf. That's what we're looking at. So this picture is very much blown up. We have the epidermis, the lower upper epidermis, very much like our skin cells, right? It's just the upper layer of the cells. However, plants also have this waxy layer on top known as the cuticle. The function of the cuticle is to do what? Protect, but to protect the loss of what?
Water.
Water, prevent desiccation. Desiccation is just a good word to have. Two good words to have that I'll give to you is desiccation and...
That's a D. No, it's an A. That's a very fancy A.
This one?
Yeah.
How that does? Better?
Yeah.
All right. Desiccation and transpiration. Desiccation is just the loss of water from anything. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from plants. So from plants. So transpiration is just evaporation, but specifically from plants. So the cuticle, the waxy layer, right, prevents desiccation. It's made of lipids, so therefore water does not interact with it. Okay. We also have the middle section here, known as the mesophyll. The mesophyll is really the working section of our plant, of our producing sugars. It's where the largest amount or the highest density of photosynthesis is going to take place. So in our mesophyll area. Our mesophyll is broken into two spots: the palisade, which is highly packed, and the spongy, right, which is not as highly packed. Don't be confused by the green and the purple, right? The spongy mesophyll, those are green as well. They're undergoing photosynthesis as well, right? They have chlorophyll and so forth. We have the palisade mesophyll, we have the spongy mesophyll, and it's really where the most of photosynthesis is taking place. Question, where does the most photosynthesis take place? In terms of, I look at a tree outside, what part of the tree? The leaves, really, but anywhere there's green, you have photosynthesis. So a sapling or a smaller shrub or a plant that has a green stem, there's going to be a little bit of photosynthesis as well. But the leaves are designed to carry out photosynthesis. That's really what their function is. Yes?
So if there's moss on the tree, does that like...
The moss is undergoing photosynthesis as well. That's a
no,
separate
but like, does
organism.
it help the tree or like... Does the tree get any benefit?
I'd say probably no benefit. Yeah, that'd be my guess. I'd say no benefit. All right, so now, why do we have the palisade mesophyll? More importantly, why do we have the spongy mesophyll that's a little bit different? Why is the spongy mesophyll less dense than the palisade mesophyll? You can see it right up there.
It has
The stoma, which is singular, or stomata, plural, is connected to it. That's the pores on the bottom of leaves that allow for carbon dioxide to come in, allow for oxygen to leave. Also, water can transpire out of it. But why do we have the palisade mesophyll on the top side with the spongy mesophyll on the bottom? Sunlight from the top. But more importantly, it's not dense because we need to allow for what?
air.
Diffusion of gases. So you have the spongy mesophyll is not as dense because we need to allow these gases to get to all the cells. So if you have your palisade mesophyll down here, it's going to stop diffusion of these gases. But now the gases can get to all the cells in here. So palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll. Now that takes us to our stoma, singular, or stomata, plural. The cells that open and close it, plants can open and close these pores, are known as guard cells. and stoma is where we have gas exchange. Interesting thing, which there actually was a question on this. Notice the stoma is not on the top side of leaves, it's on the underside of leaves. Why? Because not only are we letting carbon dioxide in, we're letting oxygen out, but water vapor gets out as well. Plants don't want to lose water though. So by having them on the bottom side, you get a little bit more protection from the sun, right? So you get a little bit less transpiration. Also, when it rains, you don't get them filling up with water and being blocked. So that's one of it. This was an AP question. It looked at lily pads. Lily pads don't have their stomas on the bottom side. They have their stomas on the top side because they float on water, right? So they're collecting gas from the top. That's the way they're designed. And if you have plants that are completely aquatic, they don't have stomata, right? Because stomata is for gas exchange. If you're underwater, your gases are just going to diffuse across the cell. So there really is no stoma. They're going to diffuse across the cell membranes. That was actually an AP question, kind of interesting. So we will talk about this when we get down here, but these stomas obviously are necessary, but they present a problem as well. They allow carbon dioxide in, but we're also going to allow water to transpire out. So there's got to be a balance there, which we'll talk about when we talk about types of photosynthesis. Everyone okay? All right. Zoom back out. There we go. So now, that's kind of the major structure of photosynthesis. Now we need to talk about the structure where it's actually taking place. So here's our leaf. Here's our cross section, similar to what we were just looking for, right? Our stoma or stomata with our gas exchange. But now we're looking down one level more. So here's our actual mesophyll cell with our actual chloroplast inside. Right? Could be hundreds of chloroplasts in each cell. Right? And here we're looking at the actual chloroplast itself. Right? So this is where photosynthesis is taking place. It's where the light reactions in the Calvin cycle take place. Notice, just like the mitochondria, it is double membrane. It has these thylakoid discs, which are in the inner membrane, and then the outer membrane outside. So each individual disc is a thylakoid. The stack of the discs is known as a grana, single, or granum, plural. And then the stroma is the area outside of the disc. So really kind of like, in essence, it would be kind of like the cytoplasm of a cell. It's not cytoplasm, it's the stroma, but that's kind of what we're referring to there. Understanding where the reactions take place is important. So the light reactions, the thylakoids are green, which is implying that they have chlorophyll, right? So that's where, well, this is the chloroplast. So they have chlorophyll in here. So this is where the light-dependent reactions are taking place that involve light. The stroma is where the Calvin cycle is taking place. So where we make the sugars. Everyone okay? Here's our equation for photosynthesis, right? We have carbon dioxide and water produce sugars, glucose, and oxygen. You'll see this in a number of different ways. This one here is really giving you the full one. It's showing that we have 12 waters coming in and 6 waters going out. Sometimes they simplify it and they just simply go carbon dioxide and 6 waters produce glucose and oxygen. They drop water on the backside because they can cancel out in a sense. So just realize you see it both ways. Also realize I don't like this question. I don't like how it's written, but I leave it there because it's a good conversation. This is showing that light energy is part of the reaction. It's the way it's written. It's implying that it's a reactant. Energy is not a reactant. The proper way to do this would be to get rid of this plus and to put it on top of the yield data. That would be the right way to write this equation.
That means in the presence.
What's that?
That means in the presence.
In the presence of. It's driving the reaction. So energy sources or enzymes that are involved in it are usually written above the yield sign. So here's kind of the full one. Here's the shorter one, carbon dioxide and water, right? With light energy, produce sugars and O2. Everyone okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't need to know where all these go. However, we should know that the carbon to build sugars comes from carbon dioxide. That's the one we should really track here. The other interesting one was what was the question in one of the, if you had radioactive oxygen, one of the questions that you had online with the varsity tutors thing? If you have radioactive oxygen, was it? Where would you find it?
Oh yeah.
Was it oxygen though?
Uh,
Oh no, it was radioactive.
It was for cellular respiration.
yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's for respiration. Sorry, yeah, doesn't even make sense. Forget what I was talking about. Thank you. For respiration. So really the only big thing we need to know here is, hey, if I have carbon dioxide, right, that carbon dioxide, the carbon's used to build the sugars. That's the main thing we're focused on. Okay, why are plants green?
Because of
Chlorophyll.
They have chlorophyll. Why is chlorophyll green?
Chlorophyll. It reflects
It's a
light.
pigment. Because what?
Oh, it reflects light from these.
It reflects what color light?
Oh, green.
Green light, right? Plants are green because they do not absorb green lights, right? Our basic color scheme, our basic light thing, right? In the summertime, you don't wear a black t-shirt because it's going to absorb
everything.
all wavelengths of light. You wear a white t-shirt because it reflects all colors of light, right? Normal light, like light from the sun, it is white light. White implies all colors, right? Cody has a red shirt on, so Cody's red shirt has a pigment, right? That pigment absorbs all colors of light except for the color wavelength of red. Red is being reflected, so the pigment is showing what color is being reflected. So if you want to kill a plant with light, you put it under a green light. Put a plant under green light, like with a green film, the plant will die because it can't absorb green light. It can't get energy from that wavelength of light. There's always a great AP question that talks about, I think I gave it to you at the beginning of the year. It talks about, I can't remember if you had it yet. It talks about why plants or how plants evolved to not absorb green light. Did you have that question? No, you will see that question. Yeah, with the ocean. You did have that question, right? So it talks about possibilities of why don't plants absorb green light, right? And it's really the answer would be kind of natural selection. And there could be a number of different reasons why. Maybe there was an abundance of light, there was no filter. So if the organism, who was the ancestor of plants, absorbed every wavelength of light, it was too much energy. They were burning up, they were going too fast through photosynthesis. Right, so they evolved to only absorb certain wavelengths of light. That's why they don't absorb green. The other one was, well, maybe there were other organisms focused on absorbing green light, right? So therefore, plants evolved to absorb other colors of light, right? Kind of the reverse process. But natural selection is really the reason why. Again, just kind of highlighting the key things here. Right, so here's our chloroplast, right? Our thylakoids, our granum, our stromas in between, all that good stuff. This is just kind of highlighting light again, right? So this is basically our colorimeters, what we've been using, right? I have a white light, I break it up with a prism, I have a solution of chlorophyll, I shine green light through chlorophyll. You should measure close to 100% transmittance, right? Because it's not absorbing green light. So our transmittance is high. Here, I'm shining blue light through, our transmittance decreases. Why? Because chlorophyll can absorb blue light. So kind of an interesting experiment just showing that, hey, the light's absorbed, the light's not. Everyone okay? All right. This is a great graph. It's something you could see on a test. Right? You don't need to memorize all these wavelengths, but be able to read this. Right? Our x-axis is wavelength. Our y-axes are different though. The top one is looking at absorption. The bottom one is looking at the rate of photosynthesis. So a question could look like this. Hazel, what wavelength of lights gives us one of the highest rates of photosynthesis? Sorry. What's that? No, so you're reading the bottom graph, and I'm looking to say, okay, so what wavelength of light correlates to the highest rates of photosynthesis? You really have two choices. You're just looking at the bottom one. So wavelength is your x-axis. the rate of photosynthesis is your y-axis. So the higher we go up, the highest rate of photosynthesis. So your two choices would be somewhere here, which is what wavelength? About 440-ish. And the other choice you can come up with is be about here, which is about 680-ish. Okay? So I could give you that question, you have to answer it, but now I'd ask the question, why? Why do we have the greatest rates of photosynthesis at about 430 nanometers and about 680 nanometers? And to justify your answer, right, you would have to use the above graph. So why do we have the greatest rate of photosynthesis at 430 nanometers? Austin,
What?
why do we have the greatest rate of photosynthesis at 430 nanometers? Justify it.
Because chlorophyll absorbs all the light.
Now, there's more pigments in chlorophyll here, so you don't need to say just chlorophyll, but we have the highest rate of light absorption. That would be justifying it. It's the highest rate of light absorption, that's why. Why do we have a high rate of photosynthesis at 680 nanometers? Because we have a high rate of absorption as well. Now, the other thing going on in this slide is really telling you that, hey, guess what? Chlorophyll is not the only pigment involved. There's actually a chlorophyll A and a chlorophyll B, which I'll show you in a few minutes. There's also other pigments known as carotenoids and xanthophyll. You already know about these because what happens in the fall? The chlorophyll green breaks down and you start seeing yellows and reds and oranges. Those are these other pigments showing through. If you look at a leaf under a microscope, you don't always just see green pigment. You can actually see these other pigments as well. They're there. They're just dominated by chlorophyll. However, when you move into the fall, the changing of the season, the cool nights, the shorter days, chlorophyll tends to break down faster. And when chlorophyll breaks down, the other pigments start to kind of show up a little bit more. You start to see them a little bit better. Question?
So the chlorophyll breaks down because of the temperature?
It's changing of the season. So like it's a less stable molecule, so it's part like the cooler nights and the changing temperatures. It's also the time of the day. The days are getting shorter as well. It's kind of like the plant's internal circadian rhythm. But temperature plays a role with it reading the changes of the seasons.
Then does it do with the other?
They do, but they don't break down as fast. What's that?
But do they increase or do they stay the same?
No, I believe they stay the same. They're just being masked by chlorophyll because it's so dominant, right? And chlorophyll breaks down faster, so the other ones start to show through for a period of time. How many people? I'll skip this slide. You can kind of read the slide on your own. How many people have stars or planets or glow-in-the-dark moons that you put on the ceiling of your bedroom? Do you have them there now? Yes, good. Somebody has it.
Take them off. Well, it's a brother too. I'll take them down, to be honest.
So how do they work? You turn your light on during the day, right? The light hits them, they get energized. When you go to bed at night, it's nice because you get these nice stars, right? But when you wake up at 3 a.m., they're not really working anymore. They kind of lost their energy. That's exactly how photosynthesis works, right? Those glow-in-the-dark stars, they have chemicals, pigments, that get excited by light. And when we say get excited, is the electrons that make up those chemicals and those stars, those electrons get excited. Chemistry people, we know that electrons can go from a ground state to a charged or an excited state, right? And there's an equivalent of light there. So if I get one photon of light, one package of light, it causes it to jump to an excited state. If it drops back down, energy is not lost. So what happens when it drops back down from the excited state to the ground state is it gives off that light, or it gives off some type of energy. So what's happening with your stickers at night is all those electrons are being excited, and then all night long they're jumping back down to the ground state and they're giving off little photons of light. They can only last so long. So that's what pigments do. So chlorophyll is doing the same thing. When light hits chlorophyll, it's causing the electrons on chlorophyll to jump to an excited state, to be energized. This fluid here is very similar to the stars. It's just a fluorescent fluid that if you shine a light on it, the electrons will be excited and then it'll glow for a period of time. Here's our chlorophyll molecule. You don't need to memorize it or anything. It's chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B. It's simply a difference in this functional group right here, CH3 versus CHO. But you can see this magnesium in the middle. That magnesium is kind of like a cofactor. Remember, cofactors help enzymes work. This magnesium is where the electrons get excited. That magnesium part right there. We're done, because we're going to start here. This is the most important slide in the PowerPoint. This is your summary slide of what happens with photosynthesis. So we will pick up here tomorrow after the quiz. You better hope the Patriots win tonight. If the Patriots win, it'll be an easier quiz.